Wisdom, wisdom, that's the test. Which rival wisdom team is best? 52 teams of 8 antique rival wisdoms that have passed the test of time to encourage, educate, and entertain generations for centuries. Team 6. Start right, act wisely. Quote definitions, biographical context, and synergy analysis. ReplaceHate.org, motivationaleducation.com, guidealife.com. The 6th and final early team. Completing the foundation arc. Quote 6.1. Be the measure great or small. Let be honest in every part. John Bright, 1811 to 1889. Quote definition. The size of the task or undertaking is not the variable that determines whether honesty is required, whether the measure is great, a civilization-shaping initiative, or small, a single conversation in a single community. The standard of honesty in every part is the same. Honesty is not the luxury of the great measure. It is a requirement of every measure, regardless of scale, because integrity does not scale with ambition. Quote application. The mission of making America wiser and kinder operates across a range of measures, from the individual workbook shared to the large-scale community initiative. John Bright's principle is a standing standard for all of them. Let every part be honest. The small measure as fully as the great one, because the integrity of the whole is constituted by the integrity of every part. No shortcuts in the small measures. No dishonesty justified by the greatness of the overall ambition. John Bright was born in 1811 in Rochdale, Lancashire, England, the son of a Quaker cotton manufacturer, educated at a friend's school, and became, alongside Richard Cobden, the dominant voice of Victorian liberal reform. Champion of free trade, opponent of the Corn Laws, opponent of the Crimean War at genuine personal and political cost, advocate for Irish land reform, and one of the most powerful orators of his era in Parliament. He served as president of the Board of Trade and Home Secretary, and his speeches, particularly his peace speech of 1854 against the Crimean War, were among the most courageous public acts of Victorian political life. His Quaker background gave his principle about honesty in every part its specific texture. Friends believed that integrity was not a public performance, but an interior condition expressed in every transaction regardless of scale, and Bright had practiced exactly that across his political career. This quote specifically encourages individuals to 1. Apply the same standard of honesty to every part of every measure, the small corner of the small task no less than the visible center of the great one, because integrity is constituted by the parts, not just the whole. 2. Resist the temptation to compromise honesty in the small measures on the grounds that the great ambition justifies the small shortcut, because the great ambition built on small dishonesties is built on the same sand as the small ambition. 3. Apply Bright's every part standard to the mission. Let every workbook be honest, every community engagement be honest, every wisdom principle be honestly held and honestly shared, great measure or small, honest in every part.
Quote 6.2. Prejudices are the chains forged by ignorance to keep men apart. Marguerite Gardiner, Countess of Blessington, 1789 to 1849. Quote definition. Prejudice, the preformed judgment that replaces genuine knowledge with convenient assumption, is not a neutral cognitive shortcut but a chain. A constraint forged from ignorance that binds people into separation from those they have prejudged. The ignorance forges the chain, the prejudice is the chain, the separation from genuine human connection is what the chain maintains. Dissolve the ignorance through genuine knowledge, and the chain loses the material it was made from. Quote application. This is one of the most direct available statements of the mission's central mechanism. If prejudices are chains forged by ignorance, then wisdom education, which dissolves ignorance through genuine knowledge, is the forge heat that unmakes the chains. Every piece of wisdom shared, every genuine human encounter across difference, every honest encounter with the full humanity of the previously prejudged, these are the antidote to the ignorance that prejudice requires to maintain the chains that keep people apart. Marguerite Gardiner, Countess of Blessington, was born in 1789 in Knockbrit, County Tipperary, Ireland, into a modest Anglo-Irish family, married unhappily at 15, escaped that marriage, eventually married the Earl of Blessington, traveled extensively in Europe, befriended Lord Byron in Genoa, and became one of the most celebrated literary hostesses of Regency and early Victorian London. Her Gore House salon attracted the great literary and political figures of her era. She wrote prolifically novels, memoirs, travel writing, and the Conversations of Lord Byron, and her observation about prejudice as chains forged by ignorance reflects both her personal experience of the prejudice encountered by a woman of uncertain social status navigating the highest social circles, and her literary career's sustained attention to what actually keeps human beings divided from each other. She had watched prejudice operate at close range and had drawn the accurate conclusion about its mechanism. This quote specifically encourages individuals to 1. Identify prejudice specifically as ignorance-forged chains rather than as natural human responses or justified caution. Naming it accurately as what it is allows addressing it at the right level, the ignorance that forges it, not merely the separation it produces. 2. Apply Gardiner's chain-forging analysis to the mission's mechanism. The wisdom education that dissolves ignorance unmakes the chains that prejudice requires, not by arguing against the prejudice, but by removing the ignorance from which it is forged. 3. Use this as a standing statement of the mission's theory of change. Prejudice chains are forged from ignorance. Wisdom education dissolves ignorance. Dissolved ignorance removes the material that the chains are made of, and the people separated by those chains find themselves in genuine human connection with each other.
Quote 6.3. The secret of getting ahead is getting started. Mark Twain, 1835 to 1910. Quote definition. Progress, getting ahead, is not primarily a matter of strategy, resources, talent, or favorable circumstances, but of the single act of beginning. The secret is not a sophisticated formula for success, but the most basic available truth about it. Nothing advances until something starts, and the starting is both the most commonly omitted and the most immediately available step. Start, and getting ahead follows. Quote application. Starting right is the framework of Team 6, and Twain's observation is its most compressed available statement. The secret is getting started. The wisdom education that remains in planning stages has not yet begun the getting ahead that starting enables. The community engagement that waits for better conditions has not yet taken the step from which all subsequent steps follow. Start. The ahead follows from the start in ways that elaborate strategy without starting cannot produce. Mark Twain appears in Teams 6, 14, 19, 26, and 32 across these 52 teams. His wit and wisdom are genuinely range-covering enough to anchor multiple distinct frameworks. Born Samuel Langhorne Clemens in 1835 in Florida, Missouri, Twain was himself a man whose starting was famously difficult and whose getting ahead was famously complete. He started as a typesetter, a Mississippi River pilot, a failed miner, a journalist, and a travel writer before the starting of the Adventures of Tom Sawyer in 1876 set the sequence in motion that produced Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, a Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's court, and the most celebrated American literary career of the 19th century. His secret of getting ahead observation reflects the biographical truth of someone who had started many things before finding the one that got him ahead, and who had concluded that the common denominator of all the getting ahead was always the same thing, getting started. This quote specifically encourages individuals to 1. Apply the get started principle as the literal secret. The strategy for getting ahead is beginning, not the elaborate preparation for beginning, not the planning of how to begin, but the actual first step that converts intention into the motion from which all subsequent motion follows. 2. Use Twain's observation as the standing response to the elaborate reasons for not starting yet, because the getting ahead that all the preparation is intended to enable begins only when the getting started actually happens. 3. Apply this to the mission's own moments of elaborate preparation without action. Get started with the workbook, the community engagement, the wisdom sharing, because the secret is the starting and nothing that follows can follow until something starts.
Quote 6.4. There is no harm in repeating a good thing. Plato 428 to 348 BC. Quote definition. The repetition of what is genuinely good. The wisdom principle stated again the genuine kindness extended again, the honest truth affirmed again, does not diminish the good through repetition but reinforces it. Only the repetition of what is not good produces harm. The repetition of what is genuinely good produces the depth of understanding and the reliability of habit that single exposure cannot. Quote application. Team 6 contains St. Jerome's Good Better Best for the 6th consecutive time, and Plato provides the justification. There is no harm in repeating a good thing. The repetition of Jerome's standard across 6 teams has not diminished it, but established it as the foundational rhythm of the entire collection. The wisdom principle repeated is the wisdom principle that moves from hearing to understanding to habit, and the mission that repeats genuine wisdom is not redundant but building the depth that repetition produces. Plato was born around 428 BC in Athens. The son of a family with political connections, became a student of Socrates at roughly 20, witnessed Socrates' trial and execution in 399 BC, traveled extensively through the Mediterranean world, returned to Athens to found the Academy, the first institution of higher learning in the Western world, and spent the remainder of his life writing the philosophical dialogues that established the foundations of Western philosophy. His observation about the harmlessness of repeating good things reflects both his pedagogical practice. He repeated core philosophical principles across multiple dialogues from different angles, and his genuine conviction that genuine wisdom required multiple encounters from multiple directions before it settled into genuine understanding. The repetition is the method, the understanding is the destination. The good thing repeated is not diminished but deepened. This quote specifically encourages individuals to 1. Embrace the repetition of genuine wisdom, in the mission's content, in community education, in personal development, as the deepening practice rather than the redundant restating that familiarity might suggest. 2. Apply Plato's no-harm principle specifically to Jerome's repeated presence across 6 teams. The repetition is the method of establishment, and what has been established across 6 teams is now genuinely foundational rather than merely stated once. 3. Recognize that the wisdom the mission shares may need to be encountered multiple times, in multiple contexts, from multiple angles before it settles into genuine understanding, and that the repetition is the work, not the sign that the work has failed.
Quote 6.5. Can you imagine what I would do if I could do all I can? Sun Tzu 544 to 496 BC. Quote definition. The question is its own answer. Most people operate at a fraction of their genuine capacity, and the gap between what is currently done and what is fully capable of being done is the territory of potential that genuine commitment to excellence could occupy. The question does not demand superhuman capability but honest engagement with the full capability that already exists and is routinely underemployed. What would full capacity actually produce? Quote application. Starting right and acting wisely requires honest assessment of whether current effort represents genuine full capacity engagement or the comfortable fraction of capacity that routine and habit deploy. Sun Tzu's rhetorical question is the standing self-assessment. What would the mission produce if it brought everything it actually can to the work? The gap between current and full capacity is not a criticism but an invitation. Imagine the full capacity and close the gap. Sun Tzu appears in Team 42 as well, where his principle about opportunities multiplying as they are seized anchored the action layer. The attributed author of The Art of War, Sun Tzu's rhetorical question about imagining full capacity deployed does not appear in The Art of War itself and may be a popular attribution rather than a verified source, but the principle it expresses is entirely consistent with The Art of War's strategic philosophy. The commander who deploys full capability at the right moment consistently defeats the opponent who deploys partial capacity consistently. The question is Sun Tzu's challenge in its most personal form, not what would the ideal army do, but what would you do if you brought everything you actually can? The gap is always available to close. This quote specifically encourages individuals to 1. Apply the full capacity question honestly. What would this work produce if it received everything I actually can bring to it? Not additional resources or improved circumstances, but the full deployment of what I genuinely already have? 2. Use Sun Tzu's rhetorical question as the standing prompt against comfortable partial capacity. The mission that operates at 60% of its genuine capability is leaving 40% of its potential impact unrealized, and the imagination of full capacity is the first step toward closing the gap. 3. Apply the full capacity standard to every dimension of the mission, the content produced at full creative capacity, the community engaged at full relational capacity, the wisdom shared at full honest depth. Imagine it. Then close the gap between the imagination and the current reality.
Quote 6.6. Good, better, best. Never let it rest till your good is better and your better is best. St. Jerome, 347 to 420 AD. Quote definition. The relentless improvement standard appears here for the 6th time as an explicitly anchored team principle. This is the foundation arc. Quote application. In Team 6, they form the culminating wisdom of the foundation arc. Repeat the good thing until it is fully established. Deploy full capacity in its service, and never let what has been established rest at its current level, but always move toward the better and the best. St. Jerome, Eusebius Sophronius Hieronymus, the Vulgate translator who learned Hebrew as an adult to produce the most accurate possible scripture, is the permanent biographical embodiment of the principle. He could have produced adequate, and did not, because the standard demanded better, and better demanded best, and the relentless pursuit of best produced the work that shaped Western Christianity for 1,000 years. The standard is established. The floor is solid. Everything from here is built on it. This quote specifically encourages individuals to 1. Receive Team SXS Jerome as the completion of the foundation arc. 6 teams, 6 explicit statements, 1 permanent foundational standard that every subsequent team stands on. 2. Carry the standard forward as the fully internalized operating rhythm. Not the rule that needs to be stated, but the ground that needs no stating, the assumption so thoroughly established that its absence would feel like something missing. 3. Apply the completed foundation to everything the mission does from Team 7 forward. The good, better, best standard is now the floor on which the entire 52-team Wisdom Project stands, and the work from here is building on that floor rather than still establishing it.
Quote 6.7. Common sense is not so common. Voltaire, 1694 to 1778. Quote definition. What is called common sense, the basic practical intelligence that accurately perceives what is actually the case and responds to it appropriately, is named as if it were universally distributed but is in fact quite rare. The observation is simultaneously a diagnosis, the quality that solves most practical problems is genuinely uncommon, and an implicit prescription, develop what its name suggests should be common but demonstrably isn't. Quote application. The mission of making America wiser and kinder is, among other things, a common-sense education project, developing in communities the basic practical wisdom that accurately perceives what hatred costs, what kindness produces, and what human dignity requires. Voltaire's observation is the honest assessment of a starting point. Common sense is not common, which is precisely why wisdom education is necessary rather than redundant. Voltaire appears in Teams 7 and 22 as well, whereas observations about common sense with big words and the snowflake avalanche mechanism anchor those frameworks. Born François-Marie Arouet in 1694 in Paris, Voltaire spent his career as the most pointed and consequential critic of religious intolerance, political tyranny, and intellectual pretension in Enlightenment Europe, and his observation about common sense's uncommonness reflects his career-long frustration with watching educated, powerful, and supposedly rational people consistently fail to apply the basic practical intelligence that their stated principles should have produced. He had watched the Calas case unfold, the judicial murder of a Protestant merchant by a Catholic court, and seen the common sense that would have prevented the travesty systematically absent in everyone with the power to apply it. Common sense was not common. That was both the observation and the problem. This quote specifically encourages individuals to 1. Develop genuine common sense, the basic practical intelligence that accurately perceives what is actually the case and responds appropriately, as the deliberate cultivation of what its name falsely implies is automatic. 2. Apply Voltaire's honest assessment to the mission's purpose. Common sense about human dignity, about hatred's costs, about wisdom's effects is not common, which is the honest case for why wisdom education exists and why it matters. 3. Use the not-so-common observation as the standing authorization for the mission's work. If common sense were genuinely common, the mission would be unnecessary. Its uncommonness is precisely what makes the mission both necessary and valuable.
Quote 6.8. Knowledge is of no value unless you put it into practice. Anton Chekhov, 1860 to 1904. Quote definition. Knowledge that is accumulated, organized, and held without being acted upon has not yet become what knowledge is for. Its value is potential rather than actual. It is the preparation for something that has not yet happened. The moment knowledge is put into practice, expressed in a decision, manifested in an action, deployed in a real situation, it becomes what it was always capable of being. Practice is the conversion of potential value into actual value. Quote application. Team 6 closes with Chekhov's practice principle as the complete statement of the Start Right, Act Wisely framework, and as the full circle closing of the 6-team foundation arc. All of the wisdom established across teams 1 through 6, the relentless standard, the belief, the conviction, the growth, the purposeful movement, the honest starting, is of no value unless put into practice. The wisdom in these 52 teams is of no value unless the person who encounters it puts it into practice. Chekhov's closing word to the foundation arc is the standing instruction for everything that follows. Practice it. Anton Pavlovich Chekhov appears in teams 37 and 46 as well, where his observations about advertising as democracy and the thought as the most fertile deed anchored those frameworks. Born in 1860 in Taganrog, Russia, the grandson of a serf who had purchased his own freedom, Chekhov worked simultaneously as a physician and is one of the greatest short story writers and playwrights in any language. His uncle Vanya, The Three Sisters, The Cherry Orchard, and dozens of short stories redefined what literary realism could achieve. He practiced medicine among peasants for no fee throughout his career. His observation about knowledge requiring practice to have value was not abstract. He was a man who had converted medical knowledge into actual medical practice among people who could not pay him, and who had converted literary knowledge into the actual stories and plays that gave that knowledge its enduring value. He put his knowledge into practice. The value followed. This quote specifically encourages individuals to 1. Convert accumulated wisdom into actual practice. The specific decision, the specific action, the specific engagement. Because knowledge held without practice remains potential value that has not yet become actual value. 2. Apply Chekhov's practice principle to the entire 52-team collection. The wisdom of these 416 quotes is of no value unless it is put into practice in actual lives, actual communities, and actual human relationships, which is why the mission exists. 3. Close the 6-team foundation arc with Chekhov's complete instruction and put all of it into practice. Chekhov, because without the practice, none of it has the value it is capable of having.
How they work together as a unified philosophy. The Start Right, Act Wisely framework, completing the foundation arc. Integrity and mechanism layer. Honest in every part and prejudice as ignorance's chain. Quotes 1-2. Right. Establish the integrity standard of the starting right. Be honest in every part regardless of whether the measure is great or small, making honesty the non-negotiable condition of right starting at every scale. Gardiner. Provide the mission's central mechanism of change in its most direct available statement. Prejudices are chains forged by ignorance, making wisdom education the specific instrument that dissolves the specific material from which the chains are made. Together, the integrity and the mechanism of starting right. Bright's every part honesty ensures that the starting is genuine rather than strategic, honest in the small measure as fully as in the great one. Gardiner's chain-forging analysis provides the specific mechanism. Ignorance is the material that prejudice chains are made from, and wisdom education dissolves ignorance, which dissolves the material, which dissolves the chains. Start honestly. Apply the mechanism accurately. The chains come apart. Starting and repeating layer. The secret of getting started and no harm in repeating. Quotes 3-4. Twain. Establish the secret of getting ahead as simply getting started. the most compressed available statement of the starting right principle, removing every elaborate preparation as the prerequisite of the act from which all advance follows. Plato. Justify the repetition that the good better best six-team arc represents. There is no harm in repeating a good thing, establishing that the wisdom repeated is the wisdom deepened rather than the wisdom diminished. Together. The starting and the repeating that wise action requires. Twain's getting started secret removes the obstacle of preparation as perpetual prerequisite. Start because that is the secret. Plato's no harm in repeating provides the rationale for the six-team Jerome arc. The good thing repeated is the good thing established, and the established good thing is the floor that Team 7 and every subsequent team stands on. Start, repeat the good thing, both are the right action. Capacity and standard layer. Full capacity imagined and the completed foundation. Quotes 5-6. Sun Tzu. Challenge the comfortable partial deployment of genuine capability. Imagine what full capacity would produce, as the standing invitation to close the gap between current and genuinely possible performance. Jerome. Complete the six-team foundation arc. Good better best in its sixth-team appearance, confirming the establishment of the permanent operational floor that every subsequent team stands on. Together. The full capacity challenge and the completed foundation. Sun Tzu's full capacity question is directed at the gap between current deployment and genuine capability. What would full capacity actually produce? Jerome's completed arc is the foundation that full capacity deployment stands on, the relentless improvement standard now fully established as the assumed operational floor. Imagine full capacity. Deploy it on the foundation that six teams have built together. Wisdom and practice layer. Common sense's uncommonness and knowledge into practice. Quote 7-8. Voltaire. Apply the honest diagnosis that makes the entire wisdom education project necessary. Common sense is not so common, establishing that the basic practical intelligence the mission cultivates is genuinely rare and therefore genuinely valuable. Chekhov. Close the foundation arc and the entire six-team sequence with a complete instruction. Knowledge is of no value unless you put it into practice, making practice the conversion of all the established wisdom into the actual value it is capable of having. Together. The diagnosis and the prescription of the complete foundation arc. Voltaire's uncommon common sense diagnosis confirms that the mission is necessary. If common sense were genuinely common, wisdom education would be redundant. Its uncommonness is the precise reason the mission exists. Chekhov's practice prescription is the complete instruction for everything that follows. The wisdom established across six teams, and across all 52, is of no value unless it is put into practice in actual lives, actual communities, and actual human relationships. Diagnose the lack. Prescribe the practice. Apply the wisdom.
Free easy extra advantage math, spelling and reading workbooks you can download for free at stop2think.com or buy at educationstopshate.com. Free easy math wisdom workbooks with octo repetition to grow math self-confidence. You'll get plenty of repetitive practice of age ranges and averages of our 52 teams of 8 quote authors. Free easy alpha cipher-coded puzzles teach letters, numbers, and phrases using antique wisdoms that encourage and educate. Can you decode this cipher quote of encouragement using either our learning to spell or just for fun instructions? And since time is money, practice reading faster with 52 teams of antique rival wisdoms that have passed the test of time to encourage, educate, and entertain generations for centuries. We offer printed versions and timed videos with background music. Sign up for free weekly emails of 52 teams of antique rival wisdom workbooks with easy math, spelling, and reading practice. And, if you'd like to get paid for sharing our wearable wisdoms, keep this in mind. Everyone I know wears a shirt, and most of us change them daily, so change your shirt and change the world. Social equalities are blatantly subliminal antique positive wisdoms repetitively shared without saying a word. This applies to all our wearable shareable wisdoms. Like pretty witty baby onesies and baby tees that you and others will see and read multiple times a day. The same is true with pretty witty kids, but they'll also share these wisdoms with anyone that can read at daycare or school. Youthful truths let your kids gain confidence sharing antique wisdoms with their friends. Imagine them sharing words of wisdom with classmates and teachers. Therefore I think tees I wear is a super easy way to share words of wisdom that have passed the test of time. Our social equalities help make us all wiser and kinder with blatantly subliminal messages promoting a more fair and equal opportunity society for all. And don't forget our giftwisdoms.com for birthdays and holidays that makes it easy to share the wisdom with clothing, coffee mugs, and magnets. So do the future a favor by encouraging, educating, and entertaining with words of wisdom that have passed the test of time to make us all wiser and kinder. With wearable wisdoms to fit babies, kids, and adults. You can clothe the whole family, city or state. Join the 52 of 8 today.